We have got to the end of the questioning, the second set of questions for Lois Austin. She was just a bit of further re-examination by her own lawyer relating to the specific number of Socialist Party members that were amongst the claimants and witnesses for the civil case against the Met Police for the Kettling on May Day 2001. I'm joined by Nell, who is Lois Austin's partner, as well as returning Donald Driscoll from the Undercover Research Group and self-confessed geek about the May Day 2001 Kettling. Just quickly on, just really, Lois Austin has been a fantastic witness once again. She's given very full answers. I don't think she had a particularly easy time with the way the questions were presented to her by the Counsel of the Inquiry. What did you make of her evidence?
I thought it was very good, and it was very honest and a good account. It did strike me that there seems to be an attempt to say, well, by the interrogation, if you like, that there's nothing to see here, move on. This is what was said about you and the Socialist Party. That's irrelevant to the case overall that we took back in the 2000s over being kettled. I thought that was quite clear. That was the intention of some of the questioning. And the reality is Lois was a key, she was key to that case and all the different stages it went to. And what she said today, I think, does show that it is very important what she said, because Carlo obviously fed information to the defence before Lois went on the stand. And that was basically saying to wind her up, that's his words. And one of the ways we identified that was the questioning, repeated questioning about the number of Irish people on that demonstration, which is vastly exaggerated. And you've got to remember, this is 2001, and it was just 2 or 3 years after the Good Friday Agreement and the peace process. So the idea of Ireland, terrorism, that's all still in the air. So that was the implication, certainly one I took at the time from it. So the idea that Irish people are there and might kick off and cause problems. A complete exaggeration about the number of Socialist Party people who were claimants in those cases, to give the idea that they were going to perjure themselves, which is just false. There's, I think Lois went through it in detail in the second part. There was about, what was it, three?
Three out of 150.
Yeah, 3 out of 150. So the idea of some sort of Socialist party conspiracy, and it was made up of loads of violent Irish people, largely, it's just completely false. But that was the big narrative by the state in those trials, because they had to give reason for the kettling. And the other big issue, I think, is that Carlo himself said in his reports to his own handlers that he saw no violence. And of course, that was used also as justification for the kettling. But he saw no violence, and he was there as an undercover police officer, and we saw no violence. So I think from all those points of view, what Lois said is quite powerful, actually, in relation to what happened in those cases 25 years ago. But I got the impression today was an attempt to sort of dismiss that a little bit, as if that's not really the real issue.
I think very much. I think you're completely right. And I'm really, it strikes me about the way in which we had this huge injustice of the kettling on May Day 2001. Then we had the huge injustice of the appalling judgment in the civil case. And yet we find there's yet another layer. One of the things this inquiry has done is shown the compound nature of injustices that exist under the British state, that there was undercover police feeding information to the council, to the Met Police, their legal representatives. Just shows. Thank goodness we've got people like Lois Austin in our movement who are willing to not drop these things. I know a huge number of people who were there on May Day 2001. I didn't make it myself. Who ended up being kettled. Let's not forget the vast majority of them didn't become claimants, didn't go on to. Most of them thought, God, I've just lost a day of my life, from 2 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. kept inside a kettle with no food, no water, no access to any toilets, no help to medical help for those who needed medical help. They didn't go forward and bring any claim. Thank goodness some people did. Thank goodness Lois Austin did. And then to find out, so many years later, that actually there's undercover police in the midst of that, just really shows what an appalling justice system we have in this country. Donald, do you want to?
Yeah, so I was there on the day. I wasn't kettled. It was a good day where I was standing. But so one thing was touched on, and it comes up in the civil case, is there was disorder on the day. There was an event to get through, but it wasn't within the circle. It was outside the circle. There was mention of Hollis Street. A group of people come behind the circus and around, and disorder, as usual, happened when the police decided they were going to charge in. And on the front line of that incident is another undercover cop, Rod Richardson. Now, years ago, when I was investigating Rod Richardson, I spoke to somebody who stood next to him on that front line. He was directly involved. That person is now dead, unfortunately. He said, Rod Richardson was directly involved in that. So, they left with blood streaming down their faces. So there is another undercover cop who could have attested, and could have tested, but no mention of him. He's an MPYU one. But so there's yet more layers to come out. We still haven't been told the full story. Carter was only one part of a much wider thing. Where there were others there. Why isn't this being brought out? Why aren't they asking the lawyers? Were you aware there was a second one who was actively, fighting his own uniforms and his comrades in uniforms?
I mean, this speaks to a real problem with the inquiry in general, is that because they've compartmentalized these different units, and the fact that we're only currently looking at the deployment of SDS officers, and that the MPOIU will come in tranche 4, they're not looking at these simultaneous deployments. These officers are at the same events, obviously aware of each other, yet the inquiry doesn't seem to have any interest in that.
But I think this is requires really focusing on what happened on the day. I think like this is a key moment in a much wider set of patterns. Just want to raise two other ones. One is like this meeting is not that much different from when HN81 Hagen meets with Walton in the Macpherson inquiry. It was like you used to say, Bob Lambert's around there. It was clearly they're setting up these meetings on the covers in order to try and manipulate the situation and that thing. The other thing is the Oxford Circus case. The reason I'm so focused on myself is it's the first really big tryout of kettling as a tactic.
Yes.
So the civil case they had to win because it's make or break for the new tactic. And there's a history that goes right back to Boiling. So after June the 18th, the Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police sat down and rebuilt from scratch their entire public order policing strategy. It's called Operation Bembao, and a lot of the documents came out in the Kettling case. And it's they've spent years rebuilding their public order strategy to this more vicious form, and this is the first test. So they had to win the case. All that work was make or break. The crushing of City of London Police as an independent public order force, the use of intelligence, the use of these encircling things. The case is one of those keystone moments where public order policing has built on that judgment. So it's can't just say it's like we can't look into the judgment when you say, well, public order policing is built on this judgment. It's one of the key recommendations. So it's so fundamental.
Yeah. So, when it came to these sort of arguments, we saw from the way in which Sarah Hemingway was asking these questions of Lois that she was like, "We're not going to relitigate." I mean, I thought she was quite petulant, really, in her approach.
Why is that on her mind?
Right. Why is that on her mind?
Yeah, well, it's not up to her for a start, is it? She doesn't decide these things, and it obviously does need to be looked at again. As you said, so much has been built on it, and the case defended by the state's just been discredited this morning, as far as I'm concerned. And also, Lois also made the point. It's also come out in written evidence that, as we know, the guerrilla gardening and was it the J18, but both there were agent provocateurs who provoked actions that allowed the state to be used as a pretext and a justification to have kettling the next year at the big May Day protests. So they created the problems, which they then said, we have to deal with these problems publicly, so that we need to be more repressive and we need to bring in a kettling operation. So all that needs to be looked at. As you say, they compartmentalize these things, but they're all completely linked up. There's a lot of collusion going on between different elements of the state and the police, and I think that's why it's so important that the evidence Lois was able to draw out, and the attempts to sort of discredit and defame basically Socialist Party members and other activists there just melted away this morning. And you have to think of the people on that Kathleen. I mean, I was there. It was over 6, 7, 8, 9 hours. People not allowed out. Old people, some very young people, people with disabilities, people forced to go to the toilet in public. I mean, the thing was absolutely atrocious, and it was a bit of a "we're going to teach you a lesson" approach. That's what I took from the day. Going to teach you a lesson. If you come out in these protests, which were worrying the governments at the time, they were getting quite big, the anti-capitalist movement. If you're going to do that, this is what you're going to get. This is going to be the reaction. And I think we were right to take the case at the time and to gather the names on the day and to take this as far as we could. And we now know, of course, that the state that they never divulged, of course, that they were being fed information by one of their own agents amongst our contingent. That was never divulged to Lois's team before she took the stand in that first case.
Yeah, and they were like, "Oh, but there was mention of undercovering 1-2 pieces of evidence." It's like, and this is the justification. It's just like a passing word somehow erases this thing. It's like, this is whose eyes are you trying to pull the wall over? Because it's not washing.
I thought Lois made a really fantastic point in that when she said, "Well, I did see the police allowing in groups of men into the cordon where no one was being allowed out." And I recognised that as being, that's plainclothes police being taken into a protest in order to act as undercover cops in that situation. I thought that's what undercover cops were, and I think that's actually what a lot of us used to think that undercover cops were before we realised the actual nature of the Special Demonstration Squad, the National Public Order Intelligence Unit, these long-term deployments, which this inquiry is about. The common understanding by the lay protester was undercover cops were individual cops on the day.
Yeah, well, so this is the weird thing. The police, this unit was totally secret. Nobody knew about it until the True Spies came out. It's like, well, somehow we're all meant to have known that there was undercover cops, and that's it. It's like, your arguments are falling down.
Yeah, we thought it was just blatant in the past, didn't we? You'd see these characters coming in and out of the demonstrations loads of times over the years. I'm sure you all did, and it's quite obvious what they're up to. There's nothing subtle about it, but of course now we find out that there was long-term embedding inside organisations going on. I think the other interesting thing come out today was the legal team at the time, now in the written statements, playing down the role that Carlo played and the information that he gave them. That's self-serving, isn't it? Because it doesn't look very well for them that they did take that information and used it. So they said, "Oh no, we didn't really believe what he was saying. It didn't carry much weight." Well, if that's the case, why did they pursue Lois in quite a hostile interrogation, basically, on the issue of the number of Irish people there, the number of Socialist Party people who were claimants, by asking her, "Do you know this and that person?" And this is precisely the sort of information that obviously Carlo was giving them and said, "Use this," and they used it. But 20 years later, they're now saying, "But of course that we didn't take that seriously, but we used it."
And also, what difference does it make? It's like the number of people who ended up in the circle, 3,000 of them, is like, that's a fairly random group of people. I don't think it's like, so what if there are socialist parties, anarchists, communists? As far as we know, there might even be right wingers in there. We don't know.
Well, I think some of the people on the claimants and the witnesses were, people who probably consider themselves middle of the road politically, or not particularly political. So, I mean, one of the main claimant, along with Lois, just got caught up in a protest. He wasn't even there to protest. He just got kettled because he happened to be walking through that part of the city. So
they had to sort of justify, say, actually, you wouldn't say everybody in there deserves to be kettled. Actually, it was a totally random group of people.
It was
fundamentally.
And as you remember at the time, this was a very broad-based movement, wasn't it? So people come from all sorts of walks of life: young people, students, professionals, workers, manual workers, everything. Everybody was there, and it was just a general net operation, wasn't it? A scoop-up operation, and the claimants and the witnesses reflect that.
I've just heard that we are actually going back in. That was the end of Lois Austin's questioning, but we will now be hearing from the undercover police officer Jason Bishop, who gave evidence on Monday for his second set of questioning. Anything else you want to add before we go back in?
No, I think it was a good morning because a lot of truth came out and it exposed what happened at the time. and what was going on behind the scenes, the collusion between the legal team and the state, used against us in those cases.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. We'll do another video, do the next break, which should be in about 45 minutes or so. Thanks for joining. Bye for now.